The galaxy was a vast and chaotic expanse, where ancient civilizations clashed and the most powerful species vied for dominance. Humanity, newly emerged from its home planet, had become a force to be reckoned with, though many still viewed them with suspicion. The human protagonist, a battle-hardened veteran of several covert operations, was accustomed to the brutality of the galaxy. He was a soldier for hire, a mercenary operating on the fringes of galactic politics, often taking on jobs that no one else would dare. For him, the galaxy was a place where survival depended on one's ability to adapt and outsmart those who held more power. His reputation was built on doing the impossible, escaping from the tightest corners, defeating the most dangerous enemies, and completing his missions with ruthless efficiency. On this particular job, he was hired to track down a valuable artifact that had been stolen from a wealthy intergalactic trader. It wasn't a mission he expected to be complicated, but as he ventured deeper into enemy territory, the job quickly took a turn for the worse. The system he found himself in was filled with warlords and criminals, lawless and chaotic. The artifact was just a small part of a much larger conflict between two alien factions, each vying for control of the area. As he infiltrated one of their strongholds, he stumbled upon something unexpected: an alien girl, trapped in a cage, her body bruised and bloodied. She was far from the helpless victim she appeared to be. Her eyes, though fearful, glinted with an intelligence that struck him immediately. Despite her fragile appearance, she was a survivor. He could sense it. The girl was unlike anything he had ever encountered before. She had the features of a humanoid species, but something about her was distinctly otherworldly. Her skin had a faint luminescent glow, and her sharp, elongated ears hinted at her alien heritage. Yet it wasn't her appearance that intrigued him. It was the palpable sense of danger that emanated from her, a danger that had nothing to do with her physical condition. Something about her screamed that she was more than what she seemed, and the soldier couldn't shake the feeling that rescuing her might be a far more complicated affair than he initially thought. The mercenary hesitated for only a moment before deciding to act. He was a pragmatist, never one to pass up an opportunity, especially one that could potentially offer him leverage in this war-torn region. He took out the guards with ease, using his signature style: silent, efficient, and brutal. The girl, initially confused by the sudden turn of events, didn't resist when he unlocked her cage. Her voice was weak, but the gratitude in her eyes spoke volumes. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible, as she stumbled to her feet. Despite her condition, the soldier noticed a strange calm in her movements, her poise in the face of danger. It was a contrast to the panic most would feel in her situation. She didn't show any signs of hysteria or fear as they made their way out of the facility. He briefly wondered if she was accustomed to being captured, or perhaps she had been in more dangerous situations before. Regardless, the soldier kept his focus. The mission wasn't over. The artifact he was after was still the priority, and he needed to get out of the enemy's stronghold with it before reinforcements arrived. As they fled into the surrounding wilderness, the soldier became acutely aware of how the girl clung to him. Silent, observing him with a steady gaze that almost seemed too intelligent for someone in her position. He had saved her, but there was an undercurrent of something more that he couldn't place. As they walked deeper into the woods, he couldn't help but notice the way she looked at him. Her expression unreadable. Was she grateful, or was there something more? He kept his guard up, unwilling to trust her completely. In this galaxy, even the most innocent appearances could be deceiving. The girl tried to speak again, but her voice was weak, barely more than a breath. "They'll come for me. They won't stop until they have me," she murmured. The words sent a shiver down the soldier's spine. It was clear that her capture wasn't random. She was valuable, and whoever was hunting her had enough resources to make this a relentless pursuit. He knew that she wasn't simply a helpless refugee. There was more to her story, but he wasn't in the mood for questions. The priority was survival. As they moved forward, the soldier couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He wasn't the type to make mistakes, but there was something about this mission that felt different. His instincts told him that this was no ordinary rescue. She wasn't just some innocent girl caught in the crossfire. She was something more, something worth far more than the artifact he had been hired to retrieve. But what? That was the question he needed to answer before it was too late. The hours passed, and they traveled under the cover of night, the soldier keeping a careful eye on their surroundings. He wasn't sure how long they had been walking, but fatigue was starting to set in. The girl seemed to be holding up well, though she occasionally stumbled. She had no supplies, no weapons, yet she managed to keep pace. Her strength and endurance seemed out of place for someone in her condition. Something wasn't adding up, and it irked the soldier to no end. It wasn't that he didn't trust her. It was that he couldn't. Not yet. They stopped to rest for a moment, and the girl finally spoke up, this time in a clearer voice. "I didn't ask for your help. I never wanted to be saved," she said, her eyes never leaving the ground. The soldier raised an eyebrow. Her words were tinged with bitterness, a sentiment he understood all too well. He didn't respond right away, choosing instead to assess her. Why had she been captured in the first place? What made her so important that an entire faction would go to such lengths to imprison her? The girl's voice broke through his thoughts once more. "I'm not what you think I am," she whispered. "I wasn't always this weak." Her words hung in the air, laden with mystery. But before the soldier could ask what she meant, there was a sudden sound, footsteps. Heavy, unmistakable. The search was already beginning. The soldier's instincts kicked in. They couldn't stay here. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet, his mind racing. Whatever secrets she harbored, they were about to be uncovered. The galaxy wasn't ready for whatever the truth might be, and neither was he. But there was no turning back now. The girl's past unraveled slowly, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. At first, she seemed like an ordinary, albeit fragile, alien refugee, a victim of the violence that had ravaged her homeworld. But as the human and the girl moved through the galaxy together, strange inconsistencies began to emerge, subtle things that gnawed at his suspicions. It wasn't the way she looked at him, nor the fact that she had quickly adapted to their harrowing escape. It was the way she reacted to threats, her eerie calmness under fire, and how her instincts seemed far too sharp for someone who had been held captive. One night, when they made camp on an isolated world, the girl grew restless. She kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting something to appear out of the shadows. The soldier, used to being hyper-alert, found himself more aware of her behavior than the surroundings. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice cutting through the silence. She hesitated, her eyes distant as if pondering whether to share the truth. "You don't know who I am, do you?" she asked, the words heavy with a burden she had been carrying for too long. The human leaned in, scrutinizing her carefully. "I know what I need to know," he replied, his voice guarded. "You were a prisoner. Now you're free. That's it." The girl shook her head. "You've got it wrong," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I wasn't just a prisoner. I was created." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, each syllable carrying a weight he wasn't prepared for. Created? What does that mean? The soldier's mind raced, trying to piece together the mystery. The girl seemed to wrestle with herself, as though struggling with how much to reveal. "I wasn't born the way you think. My people, they made me an experiment, a weapon." She stopped, her gaze avoiding his, as if she couldn't bear to see the look in his eyes. "I was bred to kill, to destroy. I don't know what I am anymore." The soldier felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. Everything about her, her unnatural composure, her calm in the face of danger, suddenly made sense. She wasn't just a girl from a ravaged planet. She was something engineered for a far darker purpose. A weapon disguised as a victim. "You're saying you were made to fight." The soldier's voice held a mix of disbelief and growing anger. "You've been trained to be a killer?" The girl nodded, her face shadowed with guilt. "I didn't ask for it. My people, they wanted to wipe out entire civilizations. I was their tool. But something happened. Something broke when my world was destroyed. I fled. I couldn't. Her voice faltered, and the human saw the deep conflict in her eyes. I ran because I didn't want to be part of that anymore. I didn't want to be the weapon they created me to be. But they won't stop coming for me. They'll find me, and they'll use me to finish what they started. Her confession hit him harder than any weapon he had ever faced. The human's mind raced as he processed the implications. The girl wasn't just a victim. She was the product of a galactic program to breed super soldiers, genetically engineered beings capable of wiping out entire species. But it wasn't just her past that made the soldier uneasy. It was the knowledge that someone, somewhere, was still hunting her, willing to sacrifice everything to bring her back into the fold. Despite his initial shock, the human didn't retreat. Instead, he did what he did best. He calculated. He needed to know more. If he was going to survive this mess, he needed to understand the girl's true nature and the depths of the threat they were facing. "You don't remember everything, do you?" he asked, his voice softening slightly. The girl's face twisted with frustration. "I don't know. I remember parts, glimpses of what I was trained to do. I remember killing, but the rest, it's a blur. I was made to follow orders. My people, they erased my past, wiped my memories clean. I was a weapon, nothing more." The human stared at her, torn between sympathy and the grim reality of what she was. "And now you're, what? Trying to be something else?" he asked, almost incredulously. "I don't know," she replied. "I don't know who I am anymore. I don't even know if I can change. But I'm trying. I don't want to be what they made me to be." The soldier let her words sink in, trying to reconcile the image of the girl he had saved with the terrifying truth she had revealed. She had been a weapon, a tool designed for annihilation. Her escape from her creators had been no accident. Her survival, her ability to flee, spoke of something more than just a broken program. It spoke of a strength she didn't fully understand. He sat back, taking a moment to think through their options. They were in enemy territory. She had no resources, no allies. If the people hunting her found them, they would be outmatched. He couldn't afford to be sentimental, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore the complexity of what he was facing. The girl might be a weapon, but she was also a person, someone who had been torn apart by the same violence she had been created to perpetuate. As they continued their journey, he became more keenly aware of the growing bond between them. There was no question that she was dangerous. He had seen it firsthand. But there was something human about her, too. She wasn't a cold, unfeeling killer. She was lost, confused, and haunted by a past that had never been her choice. In many ways, she reminded him of himself. They both had been shaped by forces beyond their control, their fates altered by others who saw them as nothing more than tools to be used. The soldier was no fool. He knew that if they kept moving, they would eventually reach the heart of enemy territory. And if they did, the girl would have to face the truth of who she was and what she had been created to do. But he wasn't ready to give up on her just yet. There was more to her story, more to uncover. And maybe, just maybe, she could be more than the weapon her creators had forged her to be. But the soldier couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Whatever was coming, he wasn't sure they could outrun it. And he didn't know if he was saving her or simply delaying the inevitable. The situation grew increasingly dire as the girl's past began to catch up with them. She wasn't just the target of a faction or a group of mercenaries. Her origins were tied to a far greater threat, one that the soldier had not fully understood until now. The girl, once a mere survivor, was now at the center of a conflict that spanned the galaxy. Her creation, a biological weapon designed to destabilize entire systems, had left her marked for death by those who had once controlled her. They wouldn't stop until they had her back. But there was something more. She wasn't just a weapon of destruction. She was also the key to something far larger. As they moved deeper into the galaxy, it became clear that there was no hiding from her creators. Every move they made, Every system they jumped to was shadowed by enemies with resources and reached far beyond their own. The girl's reluctance to speak further about her origins only made the soldier more aware of how little he truly knew about what she had become and what she had left behind. The more she hesitated to share, the more dangerous the path ahead seemed. The time for questions was running out. She wasn't just running from her past. She was running towards something much darker than either of them had anticipated. The soldier had lived his entire life under the harsh rule of survival, where everyone had an agenda, and trust was a currency no one could afford. But now, with the girl at his side, he felt like he was in unfamiliar territory. Her strength and resolve were undeniable, but so were the consequences of her existence. He had seen people like her before, tools created for purposes beyond their control. Only this time, it wasn't just a weapon that was being pursued. It was the key to a long-forgotten and highly dangerous force that could shift the balance of power across the entire galaxy. He learned that the girl's genetic makeup was part of an ancient and secret program, one that had started centuries ago, long before humanity had become involved in the galactic stage. She wasn't just a product of her creators. She was their greatest success, the culmination of generations of research and experimentation. But the program had gone rogue. Her creators had underestimated the sentient nature they had inadvertently instilled in her. She had escaped not just for freedom, but to stop the terrible future her creators had planned. And now, as they were hunted by their own people, the soldier understood that the girl wasn't just a victim or an innocent casualty of war. She was a ticking time bomb, carrying within her the potential to destroy or liberate entire star systems. For weeks, they moved through the fringes of space, evading detection as best they could. But the girl's enemies were closing in. The soldier wasn't sure how much longer they could keep ahead of them. It was a matter of time before they would be cornered, and once they were, the girl would have no choice but to confront her past, or die trying to run from it. Her creators were ruthless, willing to burn entire planets to capture her and force her back into their fold. They had no interest in her redemption. She was just another tool they had lost control over, and they wanted her back, no matter the cost. Despite the growing danger, the girl began to open up more about the true scope of her creation. She spoke of her earliest memories, of being raised in isolation, trained as a living weapon. Her purpose was never meant to be questioned, and yet, as she grew older, something within her began to change. She was more than just a soldier. She was a person with thoughts, emotions, and desires that her creators had never intended for her to have. It was this spark of humanity, this fragment of individuality, that had made her rebel escape and flee. The soldier, ever the pragmatist, didn't know how to process the revelation. To him, she was still a soldier, still a weapon, just one that had switched sides. He wasn't naive enough to think that she could just walk away from everything she had been. And yet, despite her dark past, he couldn't deny the humanity he saw in her, something that transcended the cold, calculating killer she was bred to be. He wasn't sure if it was sympathy or something deeper, but he found himself protecting her, not just because it was his job, but because he wanted to see her survive. One day, the inevitable happened. They were cornered in a remote system, far from any real support, and a powerful enemy force arrived. The soldiers were well equipped, their ships faster, more advanced than anything the human or the girl could hope to match. There was no way out, only a final confrontation. The girl, in her desperation, tried to prepare herself for what was coming. She knew that if they were caught, her life, and whatever chances she had at a future, would be over. There would be no escape, no second chances. The soldier, on the other hand, wasn't about to let it end like this. He'd fought too long, too hard, to die like this. He would go down fighting. They both would. In the moments before the battle, the soldier turned to her, his eyes locked on hers. There was an unspoken understanding between them. She wasn't just a weapon anymore. She was his ally, his equal in this fight. Together, they would either survive or perish. The soldier didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. The galaxy wasn't prepared for what they were capable of. The fight was brutal. The soldiers' tactical brilliance combined with the girls' lethal precision made them a formidable team. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that they were outmatched. The girl, with her enhanced abilities, fought alongside the human, but her limits, her broken past, began to show. Her creator's influence had left a permanent mark on her, something that couldn't be undone. As the fight reached its apex, the soldier realized that he couldn't let her be consumed by the past. She wasn't just a tool anymore. She was a person, and if she was going to die, it would be on her own terms, not as a puppet of those who had made her. In the end, the battle was lost, but the outcome wasn't what the soldiers chasing them had expected. They had underestimated the girl's ability to fight back, to resist the pull of her creators. The soldier, battered and bloodied, stood by her side, understanding finally that what they had together was something far greater than any mission, any contract, or any past that could define them. They had forged something new out of the wreckage of their worlds. What would happen next was uncertain. But for the first time, the soldier realized that this was no longer just about survival. It was about rewriting their own destinies.